Fallout 76 is bad. Fallout 76 is the worst game ever. Fallout 76, I know. I get it. Fallout 76 is not the game anybody wanted it to be, but today's video is not about an oral history of Fallout 76's failures. Instead, we're going to look at Bethesda's descent into what they are today. We're going to look at what put Bethesda in their current position, what led to Fallout 76, and why maybe, just maybe, everybody should have seen this coming. So we're going to go in chronological order. We're going to look at exactly what kicked off Bethesda's path into darkness, and then we're going to follow it up with the next reality, and you're solely going to see a picture of a studio and a publisher that eventually began to cannibalize itself in an attempt to keep up with trends. But some of these failures are overlooked, some of them are talked about, some of them are completely ignored because the games that they exist around are games that people, well, spent money on. So today isn't about your feelings. It's not about the money you spent. It's not about sucking cost fallacy. Today is an objective look at exactly how a company became one of the villains of their industry. Morrowind, Oblivion, even Fallout 3 were incredible games. Fallout 3 was an incredible technological achievement for its time. It had a bunch of glitches. It was a terrible looking game, but what it accomplished on consoles like the Xbox 360 on that generation of hardware was miraculous. It was this massive open world where you could do what you want, go where you want, and it was followed up by Skyrim, a game that had, well, similar issues, but Bethesda's real problems actually began elsewhere. October 10th, 2010, a game releases for the same generation of consoles that Fallout 3 released on. It's called Fallout New Vegas. It's developed by Obsidian Entertainment and published by Bethesda Softworks. This is important. See, Fallout 3, Skyrim was developed by Bethesda Studios, a team led by Todd Howard, and those games were owned fully from start to finish by the studio creating them. Obsidian, a studio not owned by Bethesda, was brought in to make a game and cash in on the engine that had been created for Fallout 3. The problem was, Fallout New Vegas was better than Skyrim. It was better than Fallout 3. At least that's the opinion that was held around gaming circles. Now, you may disagree, you may agree, but it doesn't really matter. See, Fallout New Vegas showed people that Bethesda lacked in one key area: storytelling, narrative, and characters. Essentially, the bases of an RPG. They had the technology, the game flow, the feel, the mechanics, but everything that made an RPG truly memorable, well, they hadn't quite nailed down as well as other people. But due to the success and the sales of Fallout New Vegas, you would think that Bethesda would learn a lesson. Gee, maybe there are outside studios that can take our property and do incredible things with them, and we'll still be able to sell them and publish them. But nope. In an interview about a year ago, Todd Howard said that working with an external studio is no longer an interest for Bethesda. The company is large enough to handle all of their projects on its own. There is no reason for them to reach out to another studio. Problem number one is ego. See, around the 2010s, Bethesda developed a reputation for being this giant, massive RPG creator that could do no wrong, and they really took that to heart, Todd Howard in particular. The studio began to believe that there was no way anybody else could do what they do better, and more importantly, if someone did, well, it doesn't really matter, we're not going to recognize that. Bethesda developed this us or nobody approach. They stopped looking for outside help, they stopped looking for creatives outside of their bubble, they began to create on their own in isolation, and well, it's led to years of failures and failures to fix problems, which leads us to Fallout 4. Fallout 4 was a massive undertaking, a gigantic undertaking. Well, actually, it really wasn't that gigantic of an undertaking. In fact, it wasn't nearly the undertaking it should have been. Bethesda went all in, continued to go all in on this creation engine approach. This, we'll continue to update our engine, but we won't make a new one, even as it continues to fail to modernize game to game. Fallout 4 was, well, a game that ran on an update of an engine that was far too old to be practical, and wasn't being updated in a way that was practical either. A game that took a very long time to create, and a game that released, and, well, it suffered from everything Fallout New Vegas didn't. It wasn't much of a role-playing game, it wasn't much of a shooter, it wasn't much of an RPG, it really was just kind of a thing that existed in this murky middle ground that proved that Bethesda doesn't know where they want to go with their games. They included a settlement system that almost everybody hated at launch and was only fixed by modders, go figure, they created your character for you, created their backstory, created their life, and told you, hey, go roleplay as exactly what we tell you to roleplay as. They dumbed down their dialogue tree to create a system that was easier to use, but less interesting. They tried to update their shooting mechanics by creating a game that apparently wants to be a shooter, but still doesn't play like one. And most importantly, they sucked you all into a story that ended in a way that they designed, in a way that wasn't your choice, and put you in a position where you had to do exactly what you didn't want to do, no matter what you chose. It was a role-playing game that from start to finish put you in the shoes that they wanted you in, and ended in the shoes that they had put you in to begin with. Over time, Fallout 4 has become very successful, well, due to mostly modding. It released broken, it released just as ugly as anything you would have expected late in last generation, and it released without a soul from a technical standpoint. Nothing worked the way it should, and nothing ever really did. But it wasn't just Fallout 4 around this time that was feeding into Bethesda's all-or-nothing approach. It was Skyrim. Skyrim, a game that people love. Skyrim, a game that without mods is fantastic. A game that was probably too good for Bethesda's own good. Skyrim was also broken at launch. In fact, the game barely worked on PS3 at all. It was one of the biggest technical failures of that generation. And that's not an understatement. For a while, the game literally wouldn't run on a console. There was a memory issue that fought with the PS3 cell architecture and basically forced the game to run at 2 FPS almost from the jump. And it got fixed with time, but it took years. For some people, the game ran smoothly from day one, but for many, that wasn't the case. Yet, Skyrim continued to be a cash cow. Through the PS3's life cycle, to the Xbox 360's life cycle, it released in 3 different forms: Game of the Year, Special Edition, Regular Edition. Then came the Switch, and it released there. Then came the PS4 and the Xbox One, and there was a release there. And then came the Special Edition for PC, which was the second release there. And then came VR, and you're starting to get it. To this day, there's over 20 different re-releases of Skyrim since its launch. And this is important because the game continues to sell and sell and sell. For Bethesda, it's not a big deal if Fallout 4 doesn't meet expectations. It's not a big deal if Fallout 76 doesn't meet expectations, because they're still selling copies of their old games to this day on current generation hardware and making $60 a pop for these things. But the worst thing is they're not even bothering to fix them. Skyrim on Switch has the exact same problems the game had on Xbox 360 and PS3. The game on PS4 and Xbox One is filled with the same glitches that you saw 10 years ago. And VR, well, that's a whole different can of worms. Bethesda developed a culture of money, and this money developed a culture of complacency, and that culture of complacency developed a culture of stagnation. And I know I said we're gonna go in chronological order, but let's go out of chronological order a little bit and look back at what Bethesda was in the Oblivion days, before Fallout 3, before Skyrim. They're the company that decided they were going to most test the bounds of this new thing, this new trend called downloadable content. No one really knew how it worked, no one was really doing it, but Bethesda wanted to be a pioneer in this downloadable content field. So for a game called Elder Scrolls Oblivion, they released $2.50 horse armor. Didn't do anything, it just made your horse look a little shiny. People seem to forget that Bethesda was one of the leaders of the original downloadable content trend. They were the trend center for microtransactions. They were one of the first to do it, and one of the first to do it on consoles, period. Now fast forward, and today $2.50 for some cosmetics seems relatively normal. In some games, maybe even cheap, but it set the stage for the realities that would coalesce after Fallout 4. See, Bethesda had been on a release schedule that looked pretty clear. Fallout 3 came after Elder Scrolls, then came Skyrim, then came Fallout 4. The next game probably should have been either a new IP or an Elder Scrolls game, but there was something Bethesda had to do first. They saw everybody eating up Skyrim in the same engine year after year after year. They saw everybody eat up Fallout 4 using the same engine, and they thought, we can still make a little bit of money off this technology, and we can make it quicker than we've ever made it before. So what they do? They took the horse armor approach, the approach they took with Fallout 4, and said, here's the exact same game, but everything that was good about Fallout 4 is now gone. Everything that was good about Skyrim has disappeared. Everything that worked in that engine is now going to be screwed with. But you can play it with your friends. Now, I can tell you from a technical standpoint, having talked to people in development circles, having talked to game developers about this very thing, that it would have been much easier significantly easier, excluding the memory problem, to develop a co-op version of Fallout 4 or Skyrim, a version where you can play with your friends, even if they only exist in your world for a short period of time, even if it's just on a visitor pass, essentially. Meaning they only exist in your world when you let them, and when they leave, they go back to their version of Fallout 4. That would have been significantly easier from a technical perspective. In fact, we've even seen modders accomplish these things in Bethesda games. So the excuse is not we needed to do all of this to make multiplayer work. It's not it at all. Bethesda needed Fallout 76 to be exactly what it is because it needed microtransactions to work. But what's funny about all this isn't really, before we get to it, where Bethesda started to finally fade away in the eyes of the public. This isn't where they lost their way, according to most people that maybe don't follow these things as quickly. Instead, it was something else. It was the deluxe edition, the special edition of Fallout 76 that really did it. The canvas bag controversy. Bethesda releases a special edition of Fallout 76. It's incredibly expensive, and they include this beautiful canvas bag, except what people get instead is some crappy $3 nylon bag. And when people fight back, Bethesda digs their heels in, terrible customer support, and takes months to fix the problem, then sends out new bags, and some of those are just as terrible as the first bags, and the lies begin. Or do they? Bethesda's lies started way before this. Remember when they were never going to charge for mods? Remember when they were going to pay their modders the rates that they were promised? Remember when the Creation Club was going to have reasonable payout rates, but more importantly, the rates that the consumers would pay for the mods were going to be reasonable? Remember when Bethesda said that they had learned from the technical state of Fallout 3 and Skyrim and that they were going to fix that for Fallout 4? Remember all the times Bethesda said that they were exclusively focused on single-player experiences and that they took pride in creating these kinds of games? Remember when they told PS3 users that the Skyrim update would come and it would get fixed, and years went by and 3 years into the game's life cycle, it still didn't work? Remember when they didn't offer refunds for PS3 owners? Remember when they promised after Horse Armor that they had learned a lesson about DLC and its pricing? Bethesda's lies are numerous. They are just as deceitful as an Activision or an EA. The difference is they made games that people felt like they could get lost in, and they didn't make them every year. They felt like an event. And then Fallout 76 launched, canvas bag and all, and, well, it was everything we'd come to expect from an EA or an Activision, except this time, there was nothing to get lost in. The game had next to no content, it had no NPCs, it had a terrible narrative, it would quickly be built around a microtransaction store, its progression was garbage, and most importantly, they lied. And not just in the simple ways. Yes, the game was absolutely and totally broken. It did not work in any way, shape, or form. Everything about this game malfunctioned. But they told us the game was ready. They told us the game was done. They told us that they had the most people ever developing Fallout 76. This was a huge dev cycle, and they had made sure that the Q&A was there and everything was good to go. And then they told us it would get fixed. And then they told us it would get fixed again, and then they told us it would get fixed again. And while they were doing all of this, they were secretly paying to have a Battle Royale mode developed instead of fixing the game. They told us that the microtransaction store would never affect gameplay, and then they released, well, the ability to pay for all of these, which takes out the grind and can put you ahead of other players. And when things went south, and they did go so south, they walked at E3 in 2019 onto that stage and made it sound like they had done something incredible. They had done something great. They should be cheered. They should be applauded because they're finally starting to give you the game that they always should have given you in the first place. They deserve praise. Look at what they're doing. Look at what they've done. They figured it out. But it's the sneakier things that are worth talking about too. Remember when Bethesda started this whole late in life cycle reveal thing, where they waited until the E3 right before the November launch of Fallout 4 to reveal their game, and did the same thing relatively with Fallout 76, and I'm sure they'll do the same thing with the next game and the next game after that. A lot of people think, well, this is great. It creates less hype. It makes people more realistic about what's coming. And most importantly, it gives the developers a chance to finish the game before they release it, instead of having to operate under 2 or 3 years worth of hype and push it out to reach a deadline they promised 3 years before they knew the game would be ready. But that's not why Bethesda's doing this. Not at all. Bethesda today is doing everything they can to create the very hype they were supposedly trying to avoid with their late-in-life reveals. That's what they thrive off of. That's what they sell. If we reveal the game super late, people won't have a lot of time to scrutinize it, and we won't have to show them too much, until the game comes out and we've made our sales. Look at Fallout 76. We knew next to nothing about Fallout 76, its actual mechanics, how the game would work, until the game launched, until the game hit beta. And even after the game hit beta, we still had no clue what was going on with the game. We weren't even sure whether or not the game would have NPCs until right before it launched. Bethesda kept everything behind a locked door, and they threw away the key until a purchase had been made. And a lot of people said, well, gamers are just fickle. Gamers just don't understand. On the Fallout 76 forum and the Fallout forum, it's gamers' fault. They all want to online Fallout, and then we give it to them, and they all want to cry. But that's not what happened. Smart gamers, savvy gamers, knew something wasn't right. Why aren't they telling us anything? Why aren't they showing anything? And sure enough, Fallout 76 was the results. I'm gonna put out a longer video, a much more detailed video, breaking down each event in Bethesda's life cycle and how it's affected the studio and publisher that we once revered. I'll break down the path of Fallout, the path of Elder Scrolls, and now the path of the company itself. But right now I want to know what you guys think. As always, what is the biggest failure you've seen come from Bethesda? What, in your opinion, is their lowest point? What's the best thing they've ever created? And more importantly, what do you want to see them do next? What is the game you need to see come from them? Is it a new IP? Are you ready for a new IP? Or do you just want to see a new engine for any IP they already own? Let me know the answers to any of those questions down in the comments below. Let's have a real conversation. As always, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. If you are not yet subscribed to this channel, press subscribe. I put out gaming analysis, examinations, and other series as much as I can, so subscribe so you don't miss any of those. As always, about every other week, once in every 5 or 6 videos, I have my friend Jordan help out and do the editing just because I love his style and I think it adds a little bit of variety to the channel. Show that man some love. We have our own channel where we do our own thing. It's over on, it's called Nostalgic. I'll put a link to it in the description, in the pinned comment or whatever. So you can check us out there. He also has his channel, but there's Jordan. So yeah, until next time, guys, I'm out.
You